What's up, Scyushi Squad? We back again some more Trove, and today we're going to be talking about crystal rings, because while I've already had videos talking extensively about Paragon levels and the update as a whole, and even the crystal rings being fit in there as well, I realized the other day that I don't have a specifically focused tutorial on the crystal rings. Now, the Paragon update actually just launched on PlayStation, not on Xbox, not on Nintendo Switch, so it just says that the update should be next week. At the least, it should be this month for you guys on the console versions, but I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to end up explaining a few things. So over here in the hub is going to end up being the new Paragon section, and I gotta give you a brief explanation as to Paragon levels themselves and what they are and so on and so forth, because lots of people are really confused. But basically, you end up getting to level 30 on a class, and then from that point on, the game just begins, because suddenly you can get an infinite amount of Paragon levels, which don't give you stats or anything like that. More notably, they end up giving you Paragon Loops, which is a new resource that's going to end up being used for various crafting components and so on and so forth, but most of all going to be related to the rings, because in the Ringcrafting bench, there's going to end up being a new tier of Ringcrafting, so you actually have to have Ringcrafting at skill 300 in order to access all of this, and then these rings are going to end up costing various resources you get from Paragon levels. So Trovian loops you just get from every Paragon level, whereas a Primal Loop specific to that class is quite literally related to getting a Prime Paragon level on that specific class. What's a Prime Paragon level? Well, if you just Google prime numbers from 1 to 1,000, every prime numbered Paragon level gives you a Prime Loop. I don't know why it's not every 5 levels, every 10 levels, or something that actually makes sense. But the only reason I'm leaning into this so hard, you know, even though we're supposed to be talking about the crystal rings, is that crystal rings can also be polished, and that is also going to end up consuming that Prime Paragon loop item. And the only reason that I'm mentioning this is because, oddly enough, it's actually easier to get to get crystal rings earlier on in your Paragon tree, because the further you get into the Paragon levels, you can actually get from Paragon level 1 to 1,000 before it resets back to 1. It's the same amount of experience per each level, but the point is that Prime Paragon levels come few and far between, and they get less and less and less frequent the further you get closer to 1,000, because that's just how prime numbers work, which actually means that, ironically, the more powerful you end up getting in your Paragon levels, the less likely you're going to be able to end up crafting rings or even polishing rings. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into the rings themselves. So, assuming you know everything that there is to do about rings in general, you know, you start crafting a bunch of them, and then the next tier requires diamonds, which you have to craft here, and then the next tier requires even more diamonds, and so on and so forth. It keeps on going until eventually it costs shadow diamonds, which costs a bunch of these items, and then there's celestial for these, and blah, blah, blah. None of this matters. You pretty much are just going to end up crafting a limited amount of rings in order to end up increasing your skill level. And I can say that 110% stellar rings become absolutely worthless as soon as the crystal rings end up getting added into the game. And those of you that are on PlayStation in particular, because of the new update, and then, you know, when it ends up coming to the other consoles, you guys want to capitalize now, because while the crystal rings themselves, the unboxed crystal ring that sits in your inventory and can be equipped, while that item isn't tradable, these signatory boxes are. So that's a really, really good way of making flux. So anyways, let's get into the details of how the crystal rings actually work. So Draco, for example, he's going to end up, you know, I'll swap to the Draco Light, and, you know, I just happen to have grinded the Draco for a long enough period of time that the game just threw me a couple extra Prime Loops, despite the fact that my Paragon level is still at level 1. But we'll just ignore that and keep going, right? So basically what's going to happen is we'll end up crafting one of these boxes, and then we could trade this, or we could open it like I just did. And then once we open it, oh good lord, my inventory is full. Here we've got a Crystal 1 ring now, which has magic damage, always generate magic damage because I opened it on the Draco specifically. Light, and then the energy regen is the random stat. So the only difference with Crystal Rings is that it's going to squeeze light value in there. And then thankfully, so long as you craft the ring for that specific class, the ring is always going to end up taking the primary damage type of that character. By which I mean, just because this is a Draco specific ring doesn't mean that we can't end up using it on my Chloromancer, because, you know, it is just going to end up giving me magic damage. So maybe I would want to end up using this on another character. So that's a very, very quick, easy way that you can bump up your entire team. All of your characters can just suddenly go, whoop, crystal rings. Never mind the stellars, they're irrelevant. However, the only reason that you end up getting class-specific rings is because of the hidden effect. So the hidden effect is quite literally a hidden ability, and each of the classes can have 3 different abilities, but the rings themselves are only going to generate with 2 of them at random. So that means you basically got RNG on RNG, because, well, actually RNG on RNG on RNG. Because these boxes contain a Crystal 1 ring with hidden effects for the Draco, but they can end up generating higher because the Crystal rings will actually be able to go up to Crystal 4. So you can get really, really lucky and get a Crystal 4 ring right away. But then what are the stats going to end up being on it? Is the secondary stat, or the third stat in the Crystal rings case, going to end up being something that you specifically want for that class? And then furthermore, are the hidden effects going to end up generating with the good abilities? Because a lot of them are hit or miss. Some of them are really, really bad. Some of them are really, really good. I'm pretty sure I have a video that talks about all the hidden abilities, but I kind of have that. It's in the Paragon update patch notes video, so I do want to have a separate video talking about it, but it's going to take me a long, long time to track down the footage of all of the different abilities. So maybe more so than that, I'll just end up having a separate video that's going to talk about each of the different abilities and my experiences with them. But anyways, so the point is that we could end up plopping this ring on our Draco, and you can see here's another crystal ring right here. This one generated with 2 different hidden effects. So we've got Firestorm and Dragonborn, whereas the other ring has Dragonborn and Dragon Force. Now, what are these hidden effects? The hidden effects are related to the ring polisher. Now, keeping in mind the fact that it takes a primal loop to craft the box in the first place, but then you're also going to end up consuming a primal loop for that specific class in order to unlock the hidden effects. However, here's the thing. This hidden effect that is going to alter some of your abilities is limited time. It's actually only going to end up lasting for 10 days, and you get 4 extra additional days so long as you have Patron on your account. Some of these abilities are just not worth that, and I wouldn't really bat an eyelash to this function, except for the fact that, once again, I want to stress, this is taking Primal Loops, which is a limited time item, or maybe not a limited time item, but again, it's the item that you slowly get less and less and less of, especially if you're using different characters for your mains. Because maybe you don't, like, maybe you love the Draco, but maybe you use Neon Ninja primarily because you're doing Uber Worlds and you use your Draco in the Delves. And because of it, maybe you're not leveling up your Draco as much, and so you don't have enough Prime Loops to consistently keep this ability, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of a wonky thing. But you can always hover over the ability and it'll end up explaining a description. So in our case of the Draco, the Firestorm ability, Spitfire, which is your right click as far as I know, yes it is, has a chance to grant a buff that allows it to be freely used for a short period of time. So you would basically be able to spam right click with your little dragon buddy for a little bit. And then Dragonborn, when dodging, the Draco leaves a burned offering, which is basically you're going to be your number 1. So that could be okay, because you're dodging on top of throwing down, which would mean, you know, the Draco, for example, has his highest amount of damage when he has all of his babies down at the same time, which is a total of 6. So by being able to dodge and throw down the eggs, maybe it would end up making it faster, but generally speaking, a pretty useless ability overall. So let's actually swap the other ability in so we can look at Dragon Force, which is summon 2 Draco allies when using Avatar of Flame, which is your ultimate ability. So that would probably end up being the better choice for the rings, I would say, just because with that, it means that when you would start engaging in battle, you would end up using your ult so that you could summon your babies right away. But anyways, I'm not trying to go off on a tangent with the class abilities. I'm just trying to get a point across before we dive deeper into the crystal rings, because as you may or may not have noticed, there is a lot of additional boxes. There's way more gem boxes than there are classes in the game. Why is that? Well, that's because there's actually higher tiers of boxes, and these quite literally are just going to end up containing, as you can see, this is guaranteeing you a crystal 2 ring or better. So with the first box, it's a crystal 1 ring that can end up being crystal 2, crystal 3, crystal 4. Good luck with that. But if you end up getting really, really unlucky with it, you could end up crafting one of these boxes, which is a crystal 2 ring or better. Well, how do you end up crafting one of these? You're going to end up needing an additional item on top of the Primal Loop. So you can see how expensive it starts getting, taking your Prime Paragon levels for that specific class, which we'll get into why that's pay to win in a little bit. But anyways, it's going to cost a Ringcrafter's ticket. So how do you get a Ringcrafter's ticket? By loot collecting crystal rings. So if we actually would end up loot collecting this other crystal ring for the Draco, you can see that we get one of these tickets, right? So follow me here because it's about to go big mode. Anyways, you end up crafting one of these boxes for 5 crystal rings. Crystal 1 ring, higher tier of crystal ring gets you more Ringcrafter's tickets, so it's kind of a hit or miss thing. Basically, the crystal 2 rings that you get out of here will end up kind of refunding you for the Ringcrafter's tickets, but it's generally going to end up being pretty bad. But there's going to end up being an even higher tier, which these boxes contain a crystal 3 ring or better, thus increasing your odds of getting a crystal 4 ring, which is basically the precipice of what you can end up getting, right? But you'll notice that this actually takes a different resource, which is a gilded Ringcrafter's ticket ring. Or Ringcrafter's ticket. And what this is gotten from is from loot collecting crystal 3 or crystal 4 rings specifically. So basically, in order to get enough of these gilder tickets, you would have to be able to craft enough of these crystal 2 ring boxes and get lucky enough to get a bunch of crystal 3, if not crystal 4 rings, so that you could then end up getting this resource, and so that you could then end up crafting that resource, or crafting these boxes. And there's nothing higher than this. There's no guaranteed crystal 4 ring, but I just wanted to kind of I want to let that sink in, just how ridiculous this is, and as you can see, how expensive it can end up being for the Primal Loops, because that's kind of the big key item here, is that Primal Loops and even the, you know, Trovian Loops and so on and so forth, all of these items are slowly just draining out of you as you end up getting closer and closer to this end game stuff, right? So why would they end up making this harebrained decision? Why does it end up doing that, on top of the fact that you have to constantly polish your rings? Well, it's no surprise. It's because the Paragon Pinatas and the Primal Paragon cubes you can buy out of the store, and these literally can end up dropping, you know, defeating it will give you something good to the person who throws it, and 7 random people, they can, okay, it doesn't seem to have the proper explanation for it, but basically you can literally just spend money to get prime loops so that you could end up crafting more and more rings. So these rings are literally pay to win. Obviously, you can still get them completely free to play, which is awesome, but it is pretty crazy, all things considered. There's also another thing that I wanted to mention here in the Paragon workbench, which is going to be the Paragon recipes. So there's going to end up being this box right here, which is a Prime Paragon box. You can only craft a limited amount of these ones per week, where you trade your Trovian Loop, 10 of them, for 3 of these boxes. Boop. Okay, cool. And then once you've exhausted the weekly, there is going to end up being these ones right here, and these are going to end up costing 15 instead of 10. So they're way, way more expensive. And I mean, you can see, like, I've got 90 Paragon loops, or Trovian loops, and I can only craft 6 of these boxes. There's not much reason I would want to end up doing that, but I'm just saying that it is there as an option. And I actually really like this function. I think that it's really, really neat that they have these boxes and this as an option, because it means that if you basically are doing, as I mentioned earlier, where you're using your Neon Ninja primarily, but you want to end up working on your Draco and making your Draco stronger, you kind of have the option to do that, because every Paragon level you get on the Neon Ninja is going to give you a Trovian loop, and then you could just end up crafting these boxes, and these boxes quite literally will end up giving you a prime loop for the class that you have active. So it's, you know, it's generally really well done. I actually really enjoy the update. Obviously, I have a little bit of stigma about the fact that it's pay to win. I mean, you think that this guy's got bad deals? I mean, there's already like a whole crystal tab now that has, I mean, the crystal tab was always here, but look at all of this. Look at all this. So I actually, the other day, just as an experiment, I bought the Powerful Paragon pack because I thought it was a one-time purchase. And I'm not against one-time purchase packs, but it's still here in the store. So it's $100 basically to end up getting 125 Paragon Pinatas, but you also get 25 Paragon Cubes and 6 Paragon Marks. Now, Paragon Marks are another item you get out of the Paragon Pinatas, and the Marks are going to end up being used to craft all of these items, and, you know, generally that's something for another day. I just felt that I could go into a little bit of extra detail for those of you that are completely introduced with the Paragon update as a whole. But generally speaking, that should cover the crystal rings. You know, despite the fact that, again, I do criticize some things with it, overall it's a great update. Crystal rings are very easily obtainable. I'm just really worried about when I get really far in the Paragon levels, whether or not, like, I don't know. It's like, I don't like the idea of temporary buffs in games in general. So I think that's why I personally am a little bit off put by the whole ring polisher thing, because it means that you have to, it basically means that you either have to be spending money or you have to constantly be grinding your Paragon levels in order to end up keeping the polish, which, I mean, some of the rings are definitely worth doing that and some of them aren't. I would only ever recommend that you polish a ring for the class that you're maining at the current time, because you don't really want to do it for anybody else, right? Because otherwise you're not really going to generate enough of the prime loops. But anyways, thanks for watching, gamers. Hope you enjoyed this video and hope that it ended up helping you guys out. If you have any additional questions, leave them in the comments. I'm sure someone will end up responding if I don't end up personally. But otherwise, I hope you have a good day. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel. Bye, guys.